Hello and welcome to the Tarig Motorsport Show. I am your host, the Big Ticket. Well, this is the Tarig Motorsport Show podcast. I am your host, Tarig, aka the Big Ticket, here to talk to you about all things motorsport related, as well as maybe a couple other things. But this week's topics tend to range simply around Formula One, Formula E, and the World Endurance Championship. I did think about adding some rallycross stuff in there, but I didn't really catch the rallycross in Catalonia, but I will talk about it on the next episode because definitely something I will probably check into, make sure I get the highlights. If there's a replay out there to watch, I'll probably watch the entire replay and make sure to get as much notes as I can down for it. But stepping away from that, if you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to rate it 5 stars on all social media platforms. Not social media platforms, streaming platforms. I'm available on all platforms. And there is also a YouTube version of this podcast. So head on over to YouTube or head on over to Tarig Waldron on YouTube. And if you want to tune in, or if you want constant updates on the motorsport world or anything of that nature, be sure to head to my social medias. If you go to the video version of this podcast, you will see that everything will be linked in the description box below. Without further ado, though, I think it is time that we go ahead and dive into this episode. Now, starting off with the World Endurance Championship, I want to talk about 6 hours at Monza. Did I watch an entire 6 hours at Monza? Hell no, if I'm being honest with you. I don't think anyone, unless you're actually at this event, or unless you have a vested interest in it and a vested value in it, I don't think that it's really a race that someone's going to sit and watch for 6 hours straight. Not unless you are a thorough fan. But for me, I have other things that I need to take care of, so watching the entire 6 hours race, no, not a possibility. But I did tune in for highlights, did catch a couple glimpses and replays and extended replays, so I feel like I got the general gist. But once again, I do like to start off this podcast sometimes reading a few articles and getting a little quick fast impression on the article and what they're talking about. Usually it's an article that I picked out because of the fact that I know what they're talking about. So this one is all about Monza, 6 hours at Monza, and of course we have the 24 hours of Le Mans coming up August 21st, so definitely something that I tune in. Okay, for that I tune in. It'll be running in the background or something, but when there's action and stuff to be had, I'll be coming back and ready to work and ready to go after it. But as we move on, as I digress. Another thing that I actually want to point out before I start that up is I've already spoken on the fact that I didn't catch this whole race, and there's maybe some other things that I also want to mention. Is how in the world does 6 hours of racing result into 3 hours and into 3 minutes of highlights? Don't get me wrong, I know that in certain instances endurance racing is just a drag. People are just maybe maintaining their position until the final 2 hours or the final hour, and then finally putting themselves in position. I understand that, but for 6 hours, I mean, I hope it's a little bit longer for 24 hours of Le Mans, but it's understandable. It's just that I went back to check the highlights, and that just stood out to me. I was like, how is it only this much? But then I'm like, nah, race action is usually just a little bit, maybe a corner here, corner there. It's never nothing crazy, but I kind of expected a little bit more. But glad to see that Toyota came out on top for sure. Toyota came out on top in this race. They have been practically undefeated this season, and I believe this is either round 4 or round 7 of the WEC. Forgive me because I did not put that in my notes this week. But keeping it moving though, this article starts off with it saying Mike Conway. I do want to point out before I do start, I apologize. Some of these names I struggle with pronouncing because I am American. We have no idea how to pronounce some of these names. I'm messing. I mean, I am, but I don't really know how to pronounce some of these names. But either way, going with it, Mike Conway and Kamui Kobayashi and Jose Maria Lopez led from pole position in the number 7 hybrid and were untroubled for most of the race, as neither Alpine nor Glickenhaus were able to challenge the two Toyotas on race pace. I do want to mention, I think I did mention the fact that I was reading an article. This is from motorsport.com. It is somewhere that I tend to go to a lot for like kind of news sometimes. That as well as Autosport and other, official, I guess race, that race classification or that race discipline, their actual governing body. I also go to them for a lot of the news as well when it comes to the team politics and all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely something, just to make sure that I point out, this is a large majority of my stuff comes from these articles and these videos. But if we keep moving into it though, there was some drama before the beginning of the penultimate hour when the Toyota just had an issue coming down the long straight, and it was, I guess, a suspected technical problem or something of that nature where it was no longer able to race, and it was down for about 40 seconds or so. And from there, they were able to jump start it and able to come back, and of course able to take the win. So props to Toyota and being able to come through and do all that kind of stuff. I will continue to read the article though. Right here, okay, basically. But there was drama at the beginning of the penultimate hour when Kobayashi crawled to a halt on a long straight following the second Lesmo corner with a suspected technical problem, allowing the 709 Glickenhaus 007 LMH of Romain Dumas to come through and take the lead. Now, Kobayashi eventually managed to restart the car and get going again, but rejoined the track 40 seconds behind the Glickenhaus. There was reprieve for Toyota when the American boutique manufacturer elected to bring the car into the garage for a precautionary brake change, but the Alpine, which had dropped to third after making an earlier stop, remained in contention for victory. The race was set to go down the wire as Conway needed to make a late splash and dash to ensure the number 7 GR010 could make it to the finish line, but a late full course yellow to recover debris from the track put paid to the chances of a late scrap for victory between Toyota and Alpine. Conway essentially earning a free stop and emerging from the pits the best part of a minute ahead of Matthew, and I don't know how to say this man's name. But as I digress, props to Toyota for holding on and making sure that they got this victory. The WEC is not something that I spend an extensive amount of time on, simply because it's really long racing and I don't feel like watching all of it all the time. I do have a life. I do have other stuff, things that I have to maintain. But keep it pushing and keeping it going. I also want to talk about Peugeot's hypercar. Now, if you haven't seen this already, head on over to my Twitter page at the Big Ticket 07, or you can head on over to Peugeot. Anything endurance related will probably have a picture of Peugeot's hypercar somewhere. It's definite. It was pretty much big news in the motorsport world. So if you were interested in it, you probably seen it. But if you haven't, definitely go check into the Peugeot the 9X8 hypercar. Definitely something that that's interesting. Basically, it's interesting. Now I do want to pinpoint some of the stuff. Now I was reading this article and Peugeot were basically pretty confident in the fact that they wouldn't need a rear wing. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, there is no rear wing on Peugeot's new 9X8 hypercar. Now, rear wing, it allows helping with downforce, making sure the cars maintain grip, all that kind of good stuff. But it's if we watch the category that this hypercar is coming in for, you see the other cars, you see the way that they're set up, all of them do have rear wings, and I would like to know how on earth this car is making the necessary downforce in order to be competitive with these cars. Obviously I am no race engineer, so I wouldn't know, but I personally don't believe that this car is going to come out the box competitive to be top 2 in the pack. I don't think so. But why would a company waste millions of dollars if they don't think that they can win? So I understand that argument, but I want to know, how do you feel about it? How do you, the listener, how do you, the watcher, I guess, thank you for tuning in. I want to know how you think about it. How do you feel about the no rear wing situation going on with Peugeot's hypercar? I know that in certain instances, I know there's people who have a better grasp on the situation, a better grasp on the actual thing that I'm talking about. So I want to make sure that anyone who has any type of values, ideas about it, definitely hit me up on my social medias, man. It's one of the best places to actually tune in and converse with me. Now I'm me personally though, I'm skeptical. It's not necessarily something that I see, it's not something that you see a lot. Practically all race cars, all of this stuff have some form of a rear wing. Now, if you actually look at the photo and all that kind of stuff of the car, you see that it does have something back there. So I'm pretty sure that's going to assist greatly in achieving this necessary downforce and all that kind of good stuff. But I just don't believe that this car is going to be competitive right out the gate, especially with initial testing not being done yet. So I'm not sure if they're going to be able to even run this car for 2022. But hey, that's the goal, and I'm pretty sure they're dedicated to that goal, and they're going to try their best to make sure that it does happen. So therefore, I mean, maybe we will expect to see a debut of the Peugeot 9X8 hypercar next year. I honestly think so. I honestly think it might be a mid-season thing, or they might only, participate in 24 Hours of Le Mans or something like that, or they might use another track for a testing and then for 24 Hours of Le Mans. There's a lot, a lot of things that goes into those types of decisions. So it's okay that they haven't gotten the initial testing and all that kind of stuff done. But I just really want to know if this car is going to be competitive from the get-go. I don't want it to be, oh, we have to adjust this, we have to adjust this. Then 2 seasons later, you're finally competitive. I know Peugeot has a long track record when it comes to motorsport. Of course, most notably to me is rally. And I think that Peugeot definitely has the ability to come out swinging right out the gate and go for first place. That's just my personal thought behind it. And of course, there are some of the car's traits that is obviously basically, I don't want to say unique. Well, aside from the fact that it has no rear wing, but it is the hybrid to fit into that category for the World Endurance Championship. It's 4-wheel drive, has a 900 volt battery, and of course, no backside. But aside from that, though, moving on, man, that's enough of the World Endurance Championship. I'm gonna head on over to the Formula One side of it. I know I am late on this. Okay, it pains me that I have to do this episode way after the actual Silverstone GP, after all the commotion, all that kind of stuff. But I felt like I still kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit. Now, obviously, I want to talk about the sprint race first. That's what happened first. I want to talk about it. My original opinion of the sprint race was not where it is now. Now, I say that to mean that I'm kind of leaning in the direction of these sprint races is low-key fire. That's the direction I'm leaning in. The reason I say that simply because it was pretty good action, man. Pretty good action, and it was a great shake-up in the grids for the actual race on Sunday. So I like it. I like it a little bit. I don't want to go all the way to say that yes, this is definitely like a really good thing. We still have to have a few others. That's another thing. Monza was also confirmed as being the second track where the sprint race will be tested out this year. So can't wait for the Monza round. Now, I've made videos, I think in another podcast I've talked about this, but this was at a point when they were talking about reverse sprint races. If you want to check into that episode, definitely check my my YouTube playlist, or just head back. I'm not sure what episode exactly is it, but definitely check my YouTube playlist. It would be in one of the descriptions. I'll find out the video. It'll be up in the corner on the YouTube version, and so definitely I'd recommend checking it out. It was an earlier thought when it was the reverse sprint races, when they were going to put basically the cars in the back of the championship at the beginning, at the front end, and do the race that way. That was thankfully vetoed, because I don't believe that you need to implement a false thing like that in order to have action. And clearly I was correct, because now they have a classic sprint race, just a short race, everybody going out there making some good stuff and doing whatever's necessary for them to stay competitive for the actual race on Sunday, which it did exactly that. So let me talk about it. For one, great action to start off, okay? Normally, I personally believe that guys might have tried to hold back a little bit, but then again, this is for qualifying. This wasn't a test. This wasn't something that they were just trying out. This was the official thing. So yes, it was great to see that there was fantastic action right at the start, right out the gate. And of course, Nikita Mazepin, he spins out right at the beginning. I do want to talk about him for a little bit. he does have a YouTube Q&A video. I'm not sure if it's out or anything like that, but I did see this a couple days ago where he had a couple YouTube videos. He had a Q&A YouTube video that was supposed to come out, and they were marketing it. His team was marketing it on Twitter, and I have to say, the comments, at least the first 100 that I scrolled through, were awesome. I don't think there's any question on there that he could honestly have in a Q&A. Either they were like questions of, complete seriousness, the sarcastic questions, rhetorical, all that kind of stuff. They were all mixed in there, and it was good to see that F1 was kind of like, the F1 fans are basically like, yo, we're not messing with this guy. I'm a fan of all racing, so I'm an F1 fan as well. Am I a fan of Nikita Mazepin? No, I haven't even thought about him in all honesty, except when he makes the news for some nonsense. But keeping it moving, or when he cuts off his own teammate like in Baku. But anyway, I'm gonna keep it moving. I just felt like that needed to be highlighted a little bit. It was just something that I remembered, but I don't think that video is gonna do well. Now, Sergio Perez, he spins off as well, and I want to highlight Fernando Alonso as well for having an impressive sprint run. Him starting off on the softs, and he was able to actually overtake 6 places and move up 6 places. Of course, as the race continued, he ended up losing some grip, so he ended up losing 2 places. That's 4 places overall that he was able to move up. Wonderful work by Fernando Alonso. I believe he was one of the big things that shook up that grid placement, and that really shook up because of the sprint race. The sprint race is set up perfectly for him. At least this first one was. Also, George Russell did some great work, pulling in, I think, a top 10 finish, something of that nature, or 11th finish. It might have been 9th finish, but he did get hit with a 3 grid place penalty, and that resulted in him coming in 12th. So, he did qualify 9th, but once again, he got hit with that penalty, and that puts him in 12th. So that's unfortunate, but he still did a pretty impressive job in order to come into the top 10. Good work, George Russell. And also, I'm not really sure where his fate is lying right now. Obviously, I believe somebody was talking to him about his intentions on maybe going to Red Bull if Red Bull had a seat open, but George hit him back with a simple, Mercedes has been by my side for a long time. I would not even think about Red Bull, because we all know something's going to shake up at Mercedes. Are they going to keep Valtteri another year? Are they going to move to another driver? And is that driver, it's a high probability that driver would be George Russell. Would Valtteri end up going to Williams, or where would Valtteri sit on that in that actual setup, in an actual situation? I don't know what team he's looking at, all that kind of stuff. I believe Haas, or if not Haas, it was Alfa Romeo, was looking to actually try and talk to him for a little bit, and they wanted to maybe have him as one of the lead drivers in their team. But I don't think those conversations have been had yet, in all honesty. Obviously, there's been like pictures, conspiracy theories, it's all that kind of stuff. Like one day Valtteri posted a picture of him and Kimi Räikkönen walking, or something like of that nature, and stuff like that. But that's all gas. But keeping it about the sprint race, both Alpines were in the top 10, and I believe this has only happened either once or twice this year. So good work to them. But this is what I mean about the sprint race actually being able to shake up the grid for the Sunday GP. It's because, cars that you wouldn't expect to see in the top 10, or cars that you wouldn't expect to see battling for that middle pack, that higher middle of the pack, you wouldn't see normally. They were there because the sprint races have actual race incidents, I guess, and race situations where sometimes you spin out, or or maybe there might be an incident with an actual crash or something like that, and it shakes up placements and all that kind of stuff. So it's dope. It was a dope concept, especially the fact that it actually worked. I do believe that reverse grid races is still nonsense, but I'm glad that this type of racing actually worked, and I'm glad that F1 is doing what they can to bounce back from 2020 not being able to have fans and those kinds of things. So I'm glad that they were able to bounce back from that. And one last thing I do want to highlight, Carlos Sainz. Remember when I talked about George Russell getting that 3 grid place penalty? It was because of a race incident that he had with Carlos Sainz in the first lap of the sprint race. Now, because of that, Sainz dropped back all the way to P18. But he put together such a great drive that he was actually able to finish off in 11th. So that right there is the highlight moment of the sprint race. In my opinion, I like the fact that I like the fact that Carlos was able to actually come back and have a wonderful and impressive drive and also finish. I mean, granted, that's probably not the position he wants and definitely not the position he would have had if he was where he was at, where he qualified. But impressive work by Carlos Sainz and definitely a good drive in my personal opinion. But let's get to the bread and butter of the actual Silverstone GP. Why don't we? Hamilton versus Verstappen. Honestly, I'm glad that now when I'm speaking about it, I see that social media has died down. Well, no, actually, no, it hasn't. Because Red Bull is on some other stuff about video footage and this, that, and the fourth. I have to dive into it a little bit more. I'm not 100% sure what exactly is happening. It's something that I have to dive into a little bit more. But I do just want to talk about, the actual race itself. Now, we knew that this was heating up for a while. We knew that this was happening. We knew that this was heating up for a while. The reason I say that, simply because we understand that these guys have been heating up. They've been rivals for 2-3 years now. This is what their third. I'm not necessarily, but they've been rivals. These two were destined to clash. They were destined to have an incident. If we look back in Formula One history, we can see clear-cut examples, which I can't necessarily think of right now, but I know they're there because I know they're there. It's happened. I've watched it. It's usually imminent, like Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton, or Vettel and I believe Rosberg or Hamilton, one or the other. It has happened before, and even in prior F1 history, it has happened where guys are just battling each other and going at it, and some race, there's one time where both guys are just not willing to yield, and this was that situation that we had in Silverstone. Neither was willing to yield, and you understand why. You understand, Max, he's a lion. He never yielded in the first place. But Lewis Hamilton was always the type of guy who was like, nah, I'm gonna back off, and save it for another race, maybe save it for, another lap, that kind of mentality. But I understand why he chose to make his stand where he did at his home GP, Silverstone. I understand why he chose that, because it's in front of your home fans. It's that home feeling. It's that energy, that buzz that you get like when you're at a home game, when you're on a team and you're at your home game. That's what this was. You don't yield, you don't back down. You go in and you do what you gotta do and try and get that win. Now, me saying do what you gotta do might lead to other implications, but no, that's not what I mean. That's not what I mean at all. I'm glad that we were able to see some pretty decent race action, even though it was only for the first lap, even though it was only for maybe half of the first lap. Obviously, there was action throughout the race and all that kind of stuff too, but this was the real pressing issue. But I also want to, kind of dive into it a little bit. Like, why is it there was such a battle over whether or not this was a race incident, whether or not who was at fault? Hamilton has always been, that kind of guy. He didn't drive like that. He doesn't drive with the intention of taking out another drive. That kind of thing, I don't necessarily think that's what he does. Verstappen doesn't back down. Now, if you have Hamilton who doesn't want to back, yes, something like this is destined to happen. Maybe at the next race it might be Hamilton who's crashing out. You never know how these things go, but this is how rivalries are. Rivalries breed contact in all types of sports, not just Formula One. In NBA, NFL, all that kind of things. You've seen where rivalries turned hostile. You've seen where incidents have happened. Maybe one person decided to open up on a tackle a little too hard or something. I don't know. There's a whole lot of comparisons that you can make across all forms of racing, motorsport, all forms of actual physical contact sport. Like, there's clear-cut indications of rivalries that heat up, and this is one of those. But I'm glad that Verstappen is actually just focused on the race. Lewis Hamilton, obviously, he's on his side missions right now. He's on his side quests and his side endeavors, but I'm pretty sure he's focused on the championship as well. Now, of course, Hamilton got his 8th win at Silverstone, which of course was great, but it was a 51G crash between him and Verstappen. Verstappen was involved in a 51G crash. I'm glad that he was able to walk out of that, but over the radio you could hear that he was a little shaken up from that. But he walked it off like a G as always, and continued on, and he's ready for race weekend in Hungary, whatever. And I do want to talk about this penalty as well. 10 seconds is definitely not enough. That was not an appropriate penalty for that race incident. 10 seconds is practically nothing for Hamilton. He's won by practically 30 seconds. He's won by over 30 seconds on several occasions. I don't think 10 seconds was that big of a detriment to him winning this race or anything of that nature. Yes, he did pass like at the last possible few laps, but I don't think 10 seconds was enough of a punishment for the race incident that did occur. And another thing, I do want to talk about the celebration as well. The celebration was a little over the top. When I'm talking about like I'm talking about the post race interview, as well as the driving around track with the flag and all that kind of with the is that the United Kingdom flag? I don't know what British flag, whatever, man. That's where he was at with it, right? That celebration was a little over the top. But my main focus, of course, celebrating your home GP, you want to ball out, you want to love, you want to, have a full-on celebration, that kind of thing. I'm not going to deny you of that, but like party, with your peoples, all that kind of stuff, that looks like a better image. But I don't think that in that post-race interview, he should have did or said what he said. I don't think that the first words out of your mouth should have been, about leaving space and this, that, and the fourth. I'm not sure if it was a post-race interview, but in one of those race interviews, I'm not sure the first thing should have been, he didn't leave you enough space. I feel like the first thing should have been, is he all right? How bad was the crash? That kind of stuff. This was a time for you to show sportsmanship. This was a time for you to show compassion to your fellow racer, to your rival, to your competition. Hamilton missed the bag on that. And of course Christian Horner on Red Bull, and everyone on the Red Bull staff and all that kind of stuff is pretty pissed still about the incident, and they want to go out there and get some action and try and change the perspective of people. It don't really matter. What's done is done. Focus on the next race. But I don't believe that Hamilton should have had that kind of dialogue, for one, right off rip, after you basically just made this crash happen, kinda. As well as, I don't believe that the first thing, over the radio, should have been that as well. That was one of the first things over the radio, is he didn't leave him enough space and this, that, and the fourth. Granted, I do think he drove past the incident, so he wasn't actually able to see the entirety of the crash happen. But still, the first thing you should probably worry about is whether or not Max was okay. From a sportsmanship standpoint, that's usually the first thing that we go to when we're thinking about it. Like, sometimes we're like, in physical contact sports, when you knock somebody out or knock somebody down or anything like that, it's usually celebrated. But in Formula One, the high class, the highest form of racing, all that kind of stuff, nah, that should be a sportsmanship moment. caring for a rival, caring for a competitor, that kind of thing. It should have been one of those rather than what it was. So there, I have to say, Hamilton, that wasn't necessarily the way to go there. I don't think 10 seconds was enough. But of course, if we continue on with the actual race, obviously there's other race action that happened within the race, but this was mainly what I just wanted to talk about. Now, of course, on lap 50 or 52, Hamilton gets past Leclerc at the same corner that he took out Max Verstappen. But one thing I do want to say, Leclerc basically chose life because he was not having it. He was not having no altercations and no issues with Lewis Hamilton at that corner. So Leclerc ran himself wide and allowed Hamilton to basically go through. I mean, yeah, he just wanted, he just Leclerc just decided, you know what, I'm okay. I'll come in behind you and just take, so it was a decent decision. Glad to see that those guys were, or glad to see that Leclerc was good too throughout that race, even with a faulty engine. I believe his power unit was having some issues, and he's also battling, Hamilton. He's battling, well, not Verstappen anymore, but he was battling Hamilton, all that kind of stuff. It was great to see Leclerc really put up a nice display and a nice drive as well. But moving away from the actual race, afterwards, I want to talk about all the racist nonsense that's just come up about with these F1 fans. God, jeez, I'm disgusted. Honestly, I didn't expect that type of reaction from people about the race incident. I didn't expect that from a lot of people, but hey, that's how some people are. That's what some people believe, and that's how some people think. Idiots, in my honest respect. Obviously, things happen on the racetrack, but I'm glad to see that all those teams, the FIA and all that stuff, even Red Bull especially, I'm glad to see what Red Bull said, where they were like, yeah, we may fight and stuff on the actual track when we're racing and we're battling and we're rivals and we're competitors, but we don't condone that shit. I'm glad that everyone was able to actually, basically piece together and make sure that their stance was known. Hamilton is basically Hamilton is the face of change in Formula One, and I'm glad that everyone was understanding, like, to not only to have his back, but also to keep pushing his agenda forward, with the Hamilton Commission, as well as the Mission 44 thing that he's doing. I had to do some more research on that. I do plan on doing a discussion video on it, like a singular topic video on it, but only once I've gotten more research in, making sure that notes are correct, all that kind of stuff. Definitely plan on doing one of those, but that's just where I'm at with it. I don't think that I'm glad that this incident have exposed some of these people for what the values that they hold, but I don't think it should happen in the first place, because that was just uncalled for. A race incident should not lead to that kind of stuff, especially and also the racist stuff that happened with those guys on the London team, that was also trifling too. It's in this day and age, bro, it's unacceptable. But I want to move away from that. Got me in a bad mood. Let's talk about Formula E. That's what I'm going to finish this up with. A nice little rumble in London. A back-to-back Saturday and Sunday race. It was definitely some good things to see. Of course, I do want to talk about it. Because there's the XL circuit. The last time they were here was in 2016, and they were only on the outdoor portion. Now this year, it's half indoor, half outdoor. Thanks to the fact that these cars, the Gen 2 cars, are practically emissions free, they were able to get this to actually happen. And another thing, it's indoor for one section and it's outdoor for another. One thing that I want to point out about that is that there were definitely an abundance of grip level changes within that race that guys had to maintain. The reason I say that is because on the indoor section, it's usually, a higher degree of maintained, and it's usually a higher degree of cleanliness, the track is usually better indoor. You know, it might be controlled temperatures, all that kind of stuff. The track is usually better on indoor circuits or indoor tracks all throughout any basic form of racing. Once you step outside, grip starts to become a little more of a problem. Tracks on the inside normally get swabbed, that kind of stuff. On the outdoor, not so much. So, you know, there was a grip condition issue or grip conditioning when guys, you know, were coming from the indoor and going into the outdoor and realizing that the grip is not the same. It's a little more mid. It's a little more it's a little less effective outside than it was on the inside. So some guys have to make those adjustments on the fly. That was great to see. That's a nice little shake up in strategy, a nice little shake up in the racing aspect, making sure guys are thinking. But I still would love to talk about this Formula E race though. Jake Dennis gets the home GP for Saturday around 12. Good job by him. I'm glad that he was actually able to get that. Actually, it was back-to-back London winners of their home GPs. It was back-to-back, and that's dope. That's dope. Congratulations to those guys. I will be discussing round 13 after I get through with this little. It's not long. It's not long. Seth Bird, the championship leader, was out of the race at round 12. He did not finish, and from there he was knocked down into third place in the championship standings. That's a bullet to bite. That is a bullet to bite. And then there's Alex Lynn and Jake Dennis were pretty much away from the rest of the field, and it was pretty much just a battle between those two guys until I believe Jake Dennis got a nice little move in on Alex Lynn and was able to actually push past and get the W. I'm also want to talk about Lucas Degrassi. Obviously on Sunday he had his issues, but on Saturday he was making some impressive moves. I do have to say, great defending, great attacking, all that kind of stuff. He was doing some decent things, and I believe that it should be highlighted. You shouldn't just highlight the errors, definitely highlight when people were doing some great things. So Lucas Degrassi, good work on Saturday, my man. That was really impressive. And I want to talk about Nick DeVries or Nick DeVries. I don't know how to say his name. I do hear his name like when I'm actually watching these races, and the announcers are talking about him and the commentators they're talking. I don't necessarily keep that all the time. So Nick DeVries with some impressive work. He pulls off second, and actually he was not a surprise to me, because I mean I haven't really tuned in to Formula E all that much, but I do tune in from here and then. I don't necessarily do episodes on it all the time, but I do tune in from here and then, and he's doing some pretty good work. After the Sunday GP, that actually put him in first in the championship standings, and some pretty good work by him. Actually, he might have been in first in the championship standings on Saturday. But moving on to round 13, great action to start. It's definitely something that, you know, a lot of these races have in common. A lot of the times guys are fighting for position and all that kind of stuff, and then throughout the middle of the race, everybody just has its own little stalemate, and then at the end people make their pushes and all that kind of stuff, and things happen. But great action at the race. Nick DeVries was pushing after an impressive run on Saturday. A lot of guys sometimes are not able to keep the same energy that they had the previous day or they had the previous week, whatever, and you know they fall off in the next race, or they fall off a race or two later. Glad to see that Nick DeVries was not one of those people, and he was able to push not only on Saturday but on Sunday. There were a few crashes on track. Some of them, I believe, were just a cause from over defending. Guys were literally pinning each other to walls. I mean that specifically when I'm talking about the DaCosta crash that basically gave him the DNF. I forget who the driver was that did basically pin him, but DaCosta was basically going in for a move on the inside line, and was pretty much just pinned up against the wall as he was trying to get past another opponent. I'm not sure, it wasn't like a forceful pin, but it was still a pin, and I'm not sure exactly what the penalty was for that. That is something I would have to research and update you guys on a little bit later. Not right now. I don't think I'm in this podcast episode, but anyway. With that accident with with that accident with DaCosta, there was a safety car and full course yellow. And Luke deGrassi on Sunday, this is what I mean about he was a little, gotta point out his good, not just his bad. Well, this is his bad. He went into the pits on the full course on the safety car restart, and just before the restart actually occurred, he went into the pits and had the pit limiter speed, all that kind of stuff, and came out in front of the rest of the field right behind the safety car. Obviously, the first thing I jumped to was, please tell me that's not legal. I was like, that was the case, I think people should have been doing that for a minute now. I don't think that's legal, is it? And sure enough, you hear the commentators making sure that they went to the stewards and all that kind of stuff to figure out what was happening. But after FIA review, he was given a drive-through penalty, but failure to actually do that drive-through penalty, Lucas deGrassi was black flagged from the race. He was disqualified. Now, Roland and Van Dorn, they have a nice little shakeup. However, I want to pinpoint this. This was at the restart of the race. deGrassi is now in that little front section of first, second, third, right? deGrassi is in first. You have Van Dorn and you have Roland in third, who's coming in to basically just trying to get a position. But if you think about it, deGrassi wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. So this one right here, I honestly believe is just people trying to get their positions back, or people trying to just try and make a move to get a higher position, that kind of thing, just in case the situation with deGrassi was legal. But why is it that in Formula E, guys are so much more willing to kind of dive bomb their opponent? If you understand what I mean, the late breaking dive bomb when they try and cut it on the inside line and get it. Because sometimes the lines, or a majority of the times the lines, especially in this Formula E, or especially at the London ePrix on the XL circuit, on certain hairpins, it's difficult because you cannot finish off your line. You usually they tend to diverge from their line to position for the next corner, but when they diverge from their line to position for the next corner, they run into whoever they just dive bombed into. It was a lot of crashes, specifically on the hairpin. All of these things had the same exact factor behind it of late breaking dive bombs. Full sends, basically. Like, all of them, or the majority of them, were from that. So I think that's an issue. Maybe on that circuit specifically. I don't think it's an issue in Formula E altogether, but definitely on that circuit. Now, one thing I do want to point out, Formula E has some great racing, unexpected action and unpredictability. That's what makes a race great. Reason I say that, because they have the attack mode feature and all that kind of stuff. And if you don't know what the attack mode feature is something that allows it's like a drive-through system that gives the drivers extra power for either an allotted time or an allotted amount of laps, and they can basically go into a more aggressive racing stance and actually fight the competition and try to get better pace, better positioning, that kind of stuff for the allotted amount of time and or laps. However, the determination of what corner the attack mode is going to be on, also how many times you can use it, and the duration of it, is determined 60 minutes before the actual race starts. So most of the time you are seeing last second strategies and all that kind of stuff, or on the fly strategies, because teams do not know ahead of time what type of situation they're going to be running into. So that brings out a whole lot of action, because you don't know when guys are going to take attack mode, you don't know when guys are not going to take it, when they're going to try and fight and defend, and when people are going to push, all that kind of, you don't know those kinds of things, and that adds another level of excitement towards the race, in my personal opinion anyway. Now, Mitch Evans also did some good work. I'm not necessarily sure what position Mitch Evans finished this race in, but he did some good work. But Alex Lynn, the other Brit, pulled away with a home race victory, Formula E victory. It was a dramatic race, a lot of diving into the turns, and a whole lot of grip on the inside, not so much grip on the outside. But I do want to kind of discuss the standings as well. Now we have Nick DeVries. Like I stated, he is now number 1 in the standings with 95 points. And then we have Robin Friends with Envision Virgin Racing. He is in number 2. He's in the number 2 spot with 89 points. And then there's Sam Bird for Jaguar Racing. He is in 3rd with 81 points. And then there's Jake Dennis for BMW at 4th. This was a pretty good race. A pretty good race in my opinion. Now, this is the end of this episode. I don't think I have anything else to really talk about. I don't think I'll be touching Rally. If you made it this far, I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. I want to thank you for tuning in. I want to thank you for, listening to it in its entirety. And, if you enjoyed this podcast, man, definitely rate it 5 stars on whatever platform you're streaming from. And, if you want to, be updated on, current motorsport stuff, motorsport related content, definitely head on over to my Twitter at TheBigTicket07, or you can follow me on Instagram at TWMS Podcast. That's TWMS Podcast. Or, that's it. If you watch the video version of this podcast, you'll have the great benefit of everything. Ooh. So I would definitely ask you to check into the video version of this podcast. But either way, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you have a wonderful week. Hope y'all enjoy all the things that there is to enjoy in life. Peace.